Acting cannot be broken up into sound and visual. When you have a lot of noise going on everywhere, it's also distracting for the actors. 40 years ago, the sound recordists were much better trained. They were much better trained because there was a demand made on them. Today, nobody makes that demand.
When and how did you learn the existence of sync sound, and how did you adapt this to the Indian context?
Well, you see, I started shooting in sync sound from the very first feature film I made. Ankur onwards, I was shooting in sync sound. At that time, when I started, I used to use a studio camera. Even though my films were shot in outdoor, I was shooting with a Japanese camera called Seiki. It belonged to the Sri Sound Studios here. And it was a camera that was designed after the Mitchell. So it was a completely silent camera. And so I was using that camera to shoot my films. Now when I was forced to use a RE2C camera, which is not a silent camera, we used to insulate it by using mattresses and so on and so forth to make it as silent as possible. And so for me, sync sound is not anything new. I've been using it from the very first film I've done. When did I come to know about sync sound? Let me tell you that in India, ever since the very first sound film was made, Alamara, in 1931, films were always shot in sync sound. They were shot in sync sound almost until 1960s, when with the new RE2C cameras, 2B and 2C cameras, when these cameras started to be used as against the older Mitchell cameras, and these were noisy cameras, it was from then I think the Indian film industry, particularly the Mumbai film industry, started to shoot films that were not sync sound. And all sound would be post-sync. That is, there would be a lot of dubbing of all the dialogues and so on and so forth. Now, I have also dubbed, but I dub when I find that the location and the environment is very noisy. If the environment is not noisy, I have always preferred to shoot sync sound, and that continues to be so till today. And one of the great advantages, there are many advantages, but one of the great advantages is that your post-production time gets reduced, when you shoot in sync sound. So the sound that you have got is your final sound when you're editing the picture. That is number one. Number two, the performance of the actors is one integrated performance. Now that's also a very important thing. When you get one, because after all, acting cannot be broken up into sound and visual. Your mime, the way you act, the way you speak your lines, a lot depends on the kind of emotion you're carrying when you're acting. And that should be the quality of your sound. Now people try and reproduce this in the recording studio afterwards. Two things happen when you do that. First of all, you don't have the ambience of any given location. Second of all, you don't get the right perspective. You see? Because everybody concentrates on getting the right timbre of voice rather than the right perspective of sound. And the character of sound that goes with a certain emotion. People's voices get heightened or lowered depending on what the emotional moment is, and also depending on where they are in perspective. People who are in the far end of the corridor are not likely to sound like they're next door to you. Now these things would have to be corrected later on by sound recordists. But when you shoot in sync sound, all these things come right. Now, there are many advantages. Then there are economic advantages, because it cuts down, as I said, your post-production period. But on location, you have certain distinct disadvantages as well as advantages. Let me take up the disadvantages first. The disadvantages on location, when you have sync sound, is that you have to be sure that every shot you have got in the camera, for the same shot, you have the exact same quality of sound, which means that your sound recordist has to be very particular. And as much as I might pay attention to my cameraman when he said that he got an okay shot, apart from me as a director saying I've got an okay shot, he should also confirm that he's got an okay shot. Similarly, the sound recordist has to confirm he's got an okay shot. Now, therefore, there is a little more time spent on this, but that is still worth it. Then on location, when you are shooting, one of the things that we all notice, that whenever an Indian film is being shot, there's a lot of noise on the location, whether it's in the studio or outside. Now, when everybody knows that the film is going to be shot in sync sound, that noise level comes down. People work much more quietly than they would otherwise do. So this is a great advantage and makes it much less tension filled. You know, when you have a lot of noise going on everywhere, it's also distracting for the actors. It's distracting for the actors, it's distracting for the technicians who are working on the film. Everybody is making a lot of noise. So that noise level will come down immediately. But in order to get good sync sound, two things are absolutely essential. The sound recordist's understanding of what quality of sound he's getting. He must be absolutely first rate. And second of all, which is something that in the Indian film industry nobody seriously pays any attention to, is the boom man, the man who is actually carrying the microphone. Because our films have not been, for many years, nobody uses sync sound, they do not know how to hold the boom, how to hold the boom mic, how to get the right sound of the people who are speaking. And the boom man, just as much as the sound recordist, does not necessarily pay as much attention as he should to the fact of the camera placement, the movement of the camera, the movement of the actors. Because the boom man has to know exactly who is going to speak at what time and where the camera is going to be at what time. Now these things are very, very important, which means that just as much as the cameraman pays the kind of attention he does to every shot he takes, the sound man has to do the same. The sound recordist has to pay as much attention as a cameraman pays both to the actors as well as to the action. So a sound recordist has to be equally familiar with the script, like a cameraman has to be familiar with the script. He must know exactly how the shot is going to go. So during the rehearsals, he must not only look, he must find his position. A boom man is very, very crucial. Now, except in India, where we pay no attention to the boom man, abroad, particularly you will find in countries like Europe, you will find that the boom man is given as much importance as the sound recordist. Because you can often have the boom man being the sound recordist and the sound recordist being the boom man. They can interchange their positions. If they can interchange their positions, it means that both are of equal importance. And this is where you must realize that when sync sound comes in, it means that the quality of your sound recordist, the quality of your boom man has to be as good as a cameraman.
I just wanted to know, do the artist performance limited in the terms of sync sound, because they have to perform as well as they have to concentrate on the dialogues at the same time?
When you are acting, you are acting with everything. You're not acting with the face in one shot and hands with another shot. You are one complete person. You have your eyes, you have your mouth, you have your ears, you have your limbs. So when you are talking about sync sound, you're talking about they're giving a complete performance. There is no such thing as a partial performance. You cannot say that he's giving me a good visual performance and he's not giving me a good audio performance. That is ridiculous. An actor is trained as a totality. So a good actor is one who will be able, just as much as his mime is first rate, his voice, ability to use his voice will also be first rate. And they will be integrated together because they're not separate things. So there's no question of separating these two things. And therefore, according to me, to get that discipline back into the film industry, everybody should actually be using sync sound. Only in those locations which are very noisy, where you really cannot use sync sound, it's okay. But otherwise, at least 90% of your film should be in synchronized sound. No question.
Do they cooperate in terms of technique and time in your film?
Everybody does. You see, when they realize, because after all, you are also saving their time just as much as you're saving yourself some time. There is much greater efficiency in using synchronized sound on the sets. No question about it. And an actor will focus his attention just as much as every technician will focus their attention correctly. You know, it is not a question of saying only the cameraman will pay attention and just as much as the director pays attention, the cameraman will pay attention, the sound recordist will pay attention, actors will pay attention. And that is what you need for a really good film. You need good performances, and a good there cannot be a better performance than a complete performance. Not done in parts, but as a totality. And it's the same thing for everyone.
What is the difference between making a sync sound film 40 years ago and today in India?
There is no difference. The difference is that 40 years ago, the sound recordists were much better trained. They were much better trained because there was a demand made on them. Today, nobody makes that demand. Film units use the sound recordist, they don't take the sound recordist very seriously. Because they say that he is only going to give you a pilot sound, so it doesn't matter. Even if they don't have a trained sound recordist, it doesn't seriously matter to them. Because all they want is a pilot track. Which means that the training of a sound recordist is languishing behind compared to the other disciplines of filmmaking.